Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. This week, our top story is the future of higher education in America. The U.S. Supreme Court just this morning overturning 45 years of guiding precedent on affirmative action, allowing universities to engage in affirmative action to admit students of color to college campuses. In his 6-3 majority opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, quote, "Eliminating racial discrimination means eliminating all of it." Roberts went on to say, quote, "Nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise." Joining us now for insight and analysis on this decision and how it might shape the future of politics in America is our political analyst, Anita Manion. Good to have you back with us.
Good to be here.
I want to keep reading from Justice Roberts. He said this, that a benefit to a student who overcame racial discrimination, for example, must be tied to that student's courage and determination, or a benefit to a student whose heritage or culture motivated him or her to assume a leadership role must be tied to that student's unique ability to contribute to the university. In other words, the student must be treated based on his or her experiences as an individual, not on the basis of race. Some in our audience may know you work at a university in the area,
That's right.
So I'm not asking you to speak on their behalf, but just looking at this, how do you think universities in general are responding to this in the middle of a summer season when they're about to have a new crop of freshman students walking onto campus?
Yeah, I think they've been closely awaiting this decision, and I think this decision was fairly expected based on the oral arguments and the responses of the judges, and the way John Roberts and Clarence Thomas and others have talked about and thought about affirmative action. It's interesting because the last case we really had on this back in 2003, where Sandra Day O'Connor said, well, maybe in 25 years, we won't need this anymore. And so that's one of the things that the justices were kind of bringing up in oral arguments, like when will this end? When will we not need affirmative action?
Mm-hmm. Justice Sonia Sotomayor also issued her dissent saying, quote, "The court cements a superficial rule of colorblindness as a constitutional principle in an endemically segregated society where race has always mattered and continues to matter." We're seeing voices like Michelle Obama speak up and say some people have legacy admissions because of wealth or power
That's
or
right.
privilege, and the court didn't take that up. How does this change the political rhetoric or the debate over race going into 2024?
This does fall in line with a lot of the other arguments we're hearing around K through 12 and higher education, which would include things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've seen sort of attacks on those issues, on books that represent diverse communities. And so I think this is part of that larger conversation about, being a colorblind society. But you have to ask yourself, is society equitable enough that we're ready for that? Now, previously, states could choose to outlaw affirmative action as a consideration in college admissions. So, for example, in Michigan, they've done that, and we saw a significant decrease in the number of black students enrolled in college.
So we see cause and effect.
That's right.
I don't know. So Governor Pritzker and I think House Speaker Chris Welch in Illinois just issued statements as well. And Speaker Chris Welch said that this goes against or flies in the, I'm paraphrasing him here, but flies in the face of public opinion. I don't know if that's actually true.
Public opinion is nuanced on this topic.
In California, we have some data we can look at to try to surmise. This is a left-leaning state, a blue state by all accounts, but the issue came up twice on the ballot in 1996, a while back. But more recently in 2020, and that reliably blue state voted against affirmative action. The most recent time, 56% of Californians voted not to let their public universities use race as a determining factor in college admissions. So the Supreme Court, at least in California, according to their recent polling, suggests they might be on the popular opinion side here.
Depending on how the question is worded and which subsample of the population you look at, it is split, and I think there's nuance. I don't think they're necessarily on the wrong side of public opinion, but this is an issue where, in this most recent case, it was Asian American students suing instead of white students suing. So I think that also plays a role in California, where you have a large Asian population. And if those students see themselves as being discriminated against, and those parents, that's going to play a factor too.
There's a lot of interesting things you can read about in the opinions. Justice Thomas had some, and Justice Jackson both going back and forth there. You can read the footnotes
feisty
there. It did, for sure. But you raised an interesting point about the way something is worded on your ballot. I want to use that as a good segue to Missouri in 2024, because two big issues could appear on the ballot in 2024: guns and abortion, two issues familiar to most American voters. First, this abortion question. If the Attorney General releases his hold on it, he's prepared to go to the appellate court, maybe to the Supreme Court, and argue that he should be able to have more influence over how much this abortion question would cost the state in a fiscal note. Usually these are just about dollars and cents.
Right.
They're projecting the loss of future taxpayers years after should abortion be allowed to return to Missouri. Megan Green, the Board of Aldermen president here in St. Louis, said he's been, quote, acting a fool and needs to release his control on this question. What do you make of this back and forth fight? Is it really just a strategy play to compress that time window to gather signatures, or is it more about grandstanding on the issue?
I think it's both. Andrew Bailey, like Missouri attorney generals before him, has used his position to grandstand, to take positions and get publicity. He's running for office and will likely have primary challengers, so this keeps him in the spotlight. He has those commercials he can make in the future, I went to bat for you, to stop abortion in Missouri. And so I think that's part of it, but you know, it is a legal strategy. What it does is it prevents those petitioners from going out and getting those signatures. It delays that.
And just yesterday, we also learned there could be a new petition, should there be enough signatures, might also be on your ballot. It's called Common Sense Missouri, I think what they're going with. It's a retired judge. Yeah. Yes, Sensible Missouri, you're right. It's a retired judge and a criminologist from UMSL who are, these people study crime, saw the effects of crime in their courtroom for decades. And they're like, some regions of the state of Missouri might be different than others, and we should allow local governments to set some moderate gun regulations if the state won't. Could that backfire against Democrats if it draws a big rural turnout to say we don't want that on the ballot?
Yeah, these ballot initiatives in 2024 I think are going to be fascinating because you're almost certainly going to have an abortion one that could draw out liberals, maybe a gun policy that could draw out conservatives. But there's 3 different versions of that ballot initiative that they've filed, and they're going to do some surveying and testing. So potentially you could have a ballot initiative that would just allow Jackson County, Kansas City, St. Louis County, and St. Louis to do it, and it could protect or exclude the rural areas, so that might be one strategy they take.
And Democrats are certainly underdogs in any race against Josh Hawley for the U.S. Senate, but Wesley Bell is trying to catch up to Lucas Kunce here with some endorsements. He had 10 mayors from North County endorsing him. Is that the path to victory in the Democratic primary, is through the urban city centers?
I mean, it showed to be for Trudy Bush Valentine. Lucas Kunce outperformed her in outstate Missouri, but she won those population centers were heavily Democrat, and that pushed her on to win the primary. Now, Lucas Kunce has a 6-month advance start on Wesley Bell, or you could say a 2-year head start on Wesley Bell. So he did set a record in the first quarter this year for fundraising with $1.1 million, which is the most a Missouri challenger to a U.S. Senate incumbent has ever raised.
He's got a head start.
That's right.
Anita Manion, thanks for joining us. Sure. Illinois House Republican Kevin Schmidt will respond to Governor Pritzker's push to rein in health insurance premium hikes when we come back.
Get the content that matters to you on your time. Breaking news as it happens.
We are following breaking news at this hour.
Weather alerts when you need them. Live streams and newscasts on your schedule. On air, online, on our app, and on 5+. No matter where you go or how you watch, 5 on your side, focused on you.
What's the forecast in Florida?
No matter where you are.
What's the forecast in St. Peter's?
Or how you get your weather.
We know you want the forecast for your backyard. And you want it now.
Right here and right now.
The 5 on your side, Weather First team. Focused on you.
Most people think this is St. Louis, but we know better. It's our neighborhoods, our people. And that's our focus, because no story is bigger than the one that affects you. 5 on your side, focused on you.
Welcome back. Joining me now is Illinois House Republican Kevin Schmidt, on the record for your maiden voyage here with us. Thanks for joining us. We want to talk about some Illinois-specific health insurance issues in just a moment. I understand you're a chiropractor and work in a medical office. But before we get to that, what was your reaction to the U.S. Supreme Court's decision about reversing affirmative action today? Governor Pritzker called it a travesty.
Well, I do like that they included in that ruling that an individual can express in their application that they, in the past, have been subject to racism and things of that nature. I do agree with the fact that race should not be the sole decider allowing people into college or not. But I do think we should look at the entire individual, and that would include all races.
How many 16 or 17-year-olds do you think might understand the complexities that go into underfunded school districts in larger racial, minority communities, or might understand the systemic issues that have predated their lives?
You're asking how many young people understand,
I guess,
oppressed communities, if you will?
If the onus is on them to articulate all of that, they haven't been to college yet. How many of them do you think can fully express that in a college application?
I think they could give testimonials, and I think they could definitely express their views. Like I said, I do think the individual should get looked at as a whole, and that does include race.
Let's talk about these changes. Governor Pritzker said this week that 2 bills he signed into law, and I think if I see correctly, you have those there in front of you, would help drive down the cost of insurance, or at the very least prevent insurance companies from jacking up your premiums too high, too quick. You were critical of these pieces of legislation. Why?
So I think legislation like this will ultimately push insurance companies out of the state of Illinois, which will then create less competition and up prices. I do see the up front, it sounds good, but those insurance companies at the end of the day aren't going to take a loss. They're going to, if they do stay in Illinois, they're going to push that loss, that financial loss, off to higher copays, higher deductibles. And then the working class people will, in the end, pay more money. My goal is for working class people to have the most affordable health care possible. And government involvement, I don't think is the number one way to do that. I would like transparency in pricing, more transparency in pricing.
That's a part of the bill.
Yeah, I agree with the transparency in pricing. As far as like going to a website, you should be able to see all of the prices, and then you could utilize AI to look at all the prices across the board. Say you say, I live at then this zip code, I want to see the best price for this, and we need options for that, and this will eliminate options. I think in the end, especially if you're cutting how much you're paying the providers, we're going to have less providers. I want more options, more
insurance
providers.
Companies try to, we're getting confused. Let's go through some of the specifics there. The first bill that you have there would create a state-run exchange in the year 2025. So it's sort of off in the distance, and that would basically replace the federalhealthcare.gov application website. So the state would set that up. That's sort of a separate issue apart from the rate review that you just referred to, where the state can now say, if you're an insurance company and you want to raise my deductible, you want to raise my copay, you want to raise the price of my insurance policy, you have to go through the state first. You said that policy would drive insurance companies out of Illinois or have them leave. But we asked the Department of Insurance director to respond to that question. And she said 41 other states in the country already have this bill. So are you suggesting that insurance companies are going to flee 42 of the 50 United States and go serve only the patients who live in 8 states?
I think they'll go to greener pastures if possible. What they will do is they will raise prices in other places to make up for that loss.
In other places outside of Illinois?
No, deductibles, co-pays, possibly paying providers less.
So what's the alternative?
At the end of the day, they're going to make their profit. And this director you're talking about was a previous Blue Cross Blue Shield employee.
A hangover from a Republican administration, I would add.
Okay.
But I wonder what the alternative is. I think most politicians would want to run on a promise of lowering the cost of health care for their constituents. I imagine you agree. Well, maybe not. You practice medicine, so.
Oh no. So I'm a chiropractor. I charge $19 every visit every time, and the reason I'm able to pull that off is because I've eliminated insurance and I've streamlined it. I've taken the middleman out, and those savings I pass on to the patient. And if we could do that, that would be great. Now I realize we can't
eliminate insurance.
No. I realize we can't do that for like cancer, heart disease, things of that nature. But if you can take some of those hands in the cookie jar out, because there's too many hands in the cookie jar, and you have a middleman, they cost.
So does that mean you support a universal insurance, like a public option? Does that mean you support socialized medicine where there's no insurance company in between? It's just the government and...
I wouldn't take it that far. What I support is the patient dealing directly with the doctor and paying the price, as opposed to having middlemen in the middle taking their cut as well.
I see.
Now, like I said, that can't work for everything. You know, you're not going to be able to foot the bill for cancer treatment or heart attack, but you would dramatically decrease costs by streamlining it.
And I appreciate you coming by. We're running low on time. I do want to get one more topic in with you because I know you've been trying to needle the Pritzker administration to send funding to some of the promised funding in the budget to some of the cities and towns in your district faster, sooner.
Yes,
give it now.
that's...
My question to you is, though, the money that's allocated in that budget, you voted against the budget.
Yes.
But you want the money to arrive faster.
The reason...
How do you explain that?
So there's parts of the budget that were horrific. You know, $1.1 billion for undocumented immigrants, the pay raises.
It was $550 million, not $1.1 billion.
Well, in the end, it's possible to be 1.1, but
the governor just froze that and capped it, so it's going to be
up
stuck
to his discretion.
Right.
He could always bring it back.
He could, but for now they froze that in place, and they said they're
for
going to
now
cap
they
it.
have.
And
That's
the
correct.
budget that was voted on that you voted against capped it at $550 million, not at $1.1 billion.
That's correct. That's correct. But he has he has the power to put it back in. So that was an issue because I want money to go to the citizens of my district, all of the citizens of my district. And then the pay raises, you know, since January to now, my pays roughly went from 70 to 90,000. So, you know,
are you going to forego that pay raise?
Possibly, yes.
Possibly, you're still thinking about it.
Yes, the next pay raise comes, I believe, soon. So,
very interesting. I'd love to talk to you more. We'll have to get you back sometime soon.
Sounds good.
Representative Kevin Schmidt, thanks for joining us. We're back in just a minute with Luke Russert.
Get the content that matters to you on your time. Breaking news as it happens.
We are following breaking news at this hour.
Weather alerts when you need them. Live streams and newscasts on your schedule. On air, online, on our app, and on 5+. No matter where you go or how you watch, 5 on your side, focused on you.
What's the forecast in Florida?
No matter where you are.
What's the forecast in St. Peter's?
Or how you get your weather.
We know you want the forecast for your backyard. And you want it now.
Right here and right now.
The 5 on your side, Weather First team. Focused on you.
Most people think this is St. Louis, but we know better. It's our neighborhoods, our people, and that's our focus. Because no story is bigger than the one that affects you. 5 on your side, focused on you.
Far too often, politics is cold, calculating, strategic, and impersonal. But the impact of politics can affect us all in very personal ways. That's, of course, part of the job of a journalist, is to illustrate those intersections between policy and real life, how one impacts the other. And one journalist, or former journalist, did that in a rather unique way. Luke Russert is the author of this new book, Look for Me There, Grieving My Father and Finding Myself. And Luke joins us now from New York City. Hi, Luke. It's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us, and congrats on your new book.
Thank you.
Your opening paragraph really drew me in. It's October of 2016. You've been this political reporter in your own right for 8 years at the time, and we're on the precipice of a nation-shifting election, but you're not there. You're out in the woods in Maine on the hiking trail instead of the campaign trail. What was that like, and did you feel like you had to be dialed in? Were you missing out?
So what you're describing is the opening prologue, and here we are, 3 weeks from arguably the most consequential election in modern history. And I was deep in the backwoods of a working lumber forest in Maine with my dog in the pickup truck that my father had given me when I graduated from high school. Almost a John Steinbeck Travels with Charlie, if you will. But I was at such a place of peace of being there, partially because I was not in the job, which I had not felt fulfilled for the last year or so, but also that I was at a place of, you know what, you have the confidence and courage to be able to walk away from that and not feel like you're missing out. And I think that was an important sign because I knew that I was on the right path, that this path of self-discovery, this path of coming to grips with the loss of Dad was something that I really needed to do and was way more important than any election could ever be, at least for me and my own psyche.
And for the younger members of our audience, or perhaps people who might be newer to the political scene, how do you describe the impact that your dad had on the American political discourse?
He was a moderator of Meet the Press for close to 17 years and turned it into the #1 Sunday morning public affairs talk show. But I think that he was really viewed as an honest gatekeeper. Both sides found him to be objective, and there was a term that if you wanted to run for president, you had to do the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary, but you also had to do the Russert primary. And what that meant was my father on Meet the Press would have long segments, 24 minutes, 30 minutes, where he would ask very difficult questions and of the belief that if you can't answer hard questions, then how are you going to make hard decisions? And I think the public resonated with that. They saw that my father was an advocate on their behalf, that he was trying to hold politicians and policymakers accountable. And when he passed away 15 years ago, I think for a lot of folks, and this is part of where a lot of the nostalgia for him comes today, it felt like the end of an era. It felt like the end of that broadcast news in the morning and the night, cable during the day, and real physical newspapers that were circulated. It was before the internet news became so much front and center in our faces, the constant Twitter and alerts and updates and the smartphone that we all now seem to carry. So he was really somebody who took the role seriously and thought the best way to preserve democracy was to have an informed public, and to do that, you really have to hold our leaders accountable.
Do you ever wonder sometimes if the rest of the country had taken that hiatus with you off into the woods for these last 8 years and come back to see it all now? Would we even recognize the political media landscape we live in today?
It's a good question. I think what's so fascinating about this era that we're in now is that for as much as we want to chart our own destiny, so much of it seems to come from what the technology is. You think of things like TikTok now, which no one knew about a few years ago, but now seems to set so much of the discourse, especially amongst young people. You'd say the same thing of Twitter 10 to 15 years ago. So we are kind of a group of people now that's sort of waiting to see what's going to come down the pipeline technologically. But I think most important, some of the things I talk about in this book are there are sort of sets of values that are inherently important no matter where we are, and that's a civic participation and understanding, but also this idea of, hey, for all the incoming that you're getting, it's important to disconnect and sit alone with the thoughts that are in your head, some of which might be uncomfortable. You know, the technology in the phones has never made it easier for us to be distracted, and that can be problematic. You don't want to live a distracted life all the time.
That's probably one of the main takeaways I had just reading your book, that this promise of democracy, the exercise of democracy that we undergo, is all about understanding and learning more about each other and each other's values so that we can forge that path to compromise. I wonder if we might not be very good at that whole exercise until we can understand or learn better about ourselves, our values.
That's a very good point. I think that when you put the best version of yourself forward, it certainly is the one that's most amenable to getting along well with others. I think one of the things that I learned by traveling the world and being exposed to all these different cultures, all these different faiths, is that there's no single right way of doing anything. I think everybody offers up their own thoughts to it. But there are universal values, whether it's civility, whether it's kindness, whether it's respect, especially in the political arena, maintaining a sense of decorum. I think one of the things that my father was very passionate about was civility and decorum, that you have to have a space where people feel respected, that they can put forward their views, not be mocked for them, but engage in an honest, spirited debate about them. And we've really moved far away from that, and I think it's problematic. Who knows if it ever comes back, because we live in this 10-second soundbite world, and it's hard to have the appropriate nuance in that space.
All right, Luke Russert, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you putting pen to paper to share your story, honor your dad, and provoke our thoughts. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on, Mark. I really appreciate it.
And we'll be right back.
Get the content that matters to you on your time. Breaking news as it happens.
We are following breaking news at this hour.
Weather alerts when you need them. Live streams and newscasts on your schedule. On air, online, on our app, and on 5+. No matter where you go or how you watch, 5 on your side, focused on you.
What's the forecast in Florida?
What's it like in Belleville?
No matter where you are.
What's the forecast in St. Peter's?
Or how you get your weather.
We know you want the forecast for your backyard. And you want it now.
Right here and right now.
The 5 on your side, Weather First team. Focused on you.
Most people think this is St. Louis, but we know better. It's our neighborhoods, our people, and that's our focus. Because no story is bigger than the one that affects you. 5 on your side, focused on you.
July 4th is coming up this next Tuesday, and as we prepare to celebrate our nation's independence on this July 4th, we went back to check the record to see what some famous politicians from this neck of the woods had to say about our American liberty and freedom. Presidents from Illinois and Missouri. President Ronald Reagan said, quote, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same." President Harry Truman said this, quote, "America was not built on fear. America was built on courage, on imagination, and an unbeatable determination to do the job at hand." And President Barack Obama from Illinois, of course, said, "We the people recognize that we have responsibilities as well as rights, that our destinies are bound together, that a freedom which only asks what's in it for me, a freedom without commitment to others, a freedom without love or charity or duty or patriotism is unworthy of our founding ideals and those who died in their defense." Some good thoughts to take with us into this upcoming holiday week. That does it for us until the same time next week. Have a great and happy July 4th. Until then, we're off the record.